Hey, Amazon brand owners, Chris McCabe of e-commerce Chris with Leah McHugh, also of e-commerce Chris. For a new episode of Solid Performance Solutions. I think we're a bit wiped from last week, which was Prime Day week. Very clumsy, awkward to say, Prime Day week, but they insist on making it. They insist on making it several days.
Prime Day, 4 days.
Well, why don't we start with that? I was going to start by saying everyone's posts and comments tended to stick to the same script, which was up single-digit % from last year. We expect that. We expect it to go up every year. But average purchase amount and average household spend, let's call it, down.
Not particularly surprising, considering
several bucks.
The economy.
Yeah, down several dollars per order versus last year. No, not surprising, but still important because people are hunting discounts harder. And that means maybe your Prime Day setup in terms of how you do lightning deals or what types of discounts you're building in, which of course for a lot of brands, it's harder to discount things. You have to kind of make more out of every sale just because your margins are tighter, but you still have to discount if you're going to be meaningful on that Prime Day week month period. So that's kind of interesting because what does that mean for next year? And also what does it mean for Q4? That could be our topic.
Now we've finished with dads and grad season. I guess it's time to start thinking about Q4. Although I guess you're only really thinking about dads and grad season if you're selling a product that relates to one of those things.
Well, I guess the first question is there a Prime Day or week letdown where not just the resulting drop in sales, of course, there's a bit of a drop in most sales right after Prime Day. But let's say for the month of July, because I had an interesting comment from somebody pretty well known in our space, but on the ad side of the business, we don't have to use names, but who said July's looking like it's going to be rough or looking like it might be painful. And I thought that was an interesting comment because I was wondering if that's just Prime Day letdown stuff. I mean, there should only be a dip for a week to 10 days, right? Not like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the kinds of products you're selling. If you're selling everyday household items, you're probably not that affected by Prime Day sales or busy sales periods necessarily. But then the flip side of that is maybe you're selling a seasonal household day item. And so, I don't know. Yes, there are definitely trends across the entire marketplace in terms of increases in sales and decreases in sales. I just am reticent to get into anecdotal everybody's sales are down this month without hard data because it really depends on the types of products that you're looking at.
And I don't want to go category by category data.
And I'm not, but I'm just saying that the anecdotal everybody's sales are down does tend to be a little bit skewed unless you're looking at entire marketplace data.
But there's a general, anyone who consumes LinkedIn as much as I do, but also off LinkedIn, private comments and news articles and other things, general consensus is maybe, it's a few too many days in Prime Day, which was kind of whispered around last year. I think that's definitely a commonly held belief now. And maybe there was just a bit of a malaise this year that wasn't necessarily present last year.
I've also not just the economy, really seeing consumers or media coverage of how amazing Prime Day deals are. I think the deals aren't as good as they maybe used to be, or people are just used to them at this point. And that is sort of the risk that you run with any sort of discounting strategy. Many retailers have made this mistake over the years where they start running too many promotions and then people wait for the promotions and stop wanting to purchase from them at full price. And I think there is a risk there with Amazon doing this. Plus, you now have Walmart running a similar event each year, TikTok running a similar event. Now you're sort of changing the marketplace into deal hunting rather than those consistent sales. And again, I do think that very much depends on your product category, but it also depends on the placement of your brand. If you're selling a luxury item or if you're selling something that is particularly unique, you're not going to be as affected by these sorts of changes to the market.
I have a couple other theories to run by you.
Nothing to add to what I just said.
Well, no, I agree with everything. I agree with everything you just said. I know. I'm guilty. People used to complain about Jay Leno doing this, right? Not to date me, but he was always thinking of the next question and he wasn't listening to the thing that his guest was saying. That was the biggest knock on Jay Leno, and I think it was accurate. So I'm guilty of that on occasion. I think you're right. I also just think this year was unique in other ways. For example, I think a bunch of agencies kind of knew or know that they're not going to stick around for some of the brands they're working with. And maybe they emphasized some and de-emphasized others because they are expecting to shed a few of them, because there's an agency kind of turnstile right now where people are trying different agencies or just going without agencies. And that is a much more pronounced trend than it was this time last year.
I mean, you've also got a consolidation of competition. There's so many different things at play here that it's really hard to compare one Prime Day to the other.
I don't think so.
Let's get an economist on the show and we can discuss this in depth.
We'll get Krugman for the next one. I'm sure he cares a lot about Prime Day.
In Boston, we can find an economist.
That's right. We can find an economist down the street. We're in Cambridge, by the way. No, I disagree. I think this was a different one. I think there's also things like what we've been saying all year. Some 7-figure brands, this will be their last, if it's not their last Prime Day, it'll be their last meaningful Prime Day. And they either had to sell through way more inventory right now for their balance sheet to show increase of sales, to make themselves more attractive as a target for acquisition. But they also maybe haven't made as much this year, and discounting so much product, kind of what you just said, discounting so much product so often means that they're selling that inventory for less and they're making less, and their revenue is going to be less meaningful, and their market share is going to plummet further, which makes them less enticing of a target.
Yeah, and that is sort of the usual economic catch-22, I guess, is that when your costs are higher, generally consumer costs are higher, which also means that consumers are looking for cheaper or better deals when it's more difficult for you to give the cheaper or better deals because your costs are now higher. So you're either lowering your margin to sell more, or you're trying to keep that margin and potentially selling less, or trying to position yourselves as worth the additional expense, which can be difficult to do when you are in a highly competitive space, or maybe you're only on Amazon where there isn't really that much of a brand loyalty and people are just looking for whatever the best deal is.
I think brand loyalty on Amazon depends on a multitude of factors. I mean, isn't that why people are investing so much in TikTok, to boost brand awareness and brand loyalty on Amazon?
But that's my point. If you are only focusing on Amazon, then you probably aren't getting that sort of brand loyalty. Whereas if you are selling on multiple platforms and doing other marketing than Amazon ads, then it's potentially more expensive because you're doing a number of other things, but you do have more of that brand loyalty where people aren't just going to go and look for the cheapest version of whatever it is that you sell. And so you do have the ability to maybe charge more, but it also costs more to have that sort of strategy.
That's true, because of the ad spend always going up. And maybe some people were pulling back and not putting as much into ad spend or marketing in general, and maybe it cost them. Maybe that's some of the people who were underwhelmed.
Well, yeah, I mean, Amazon is getting more and more expensive. Everything costs more on Amazon. So
yes,
that's also always going to be a part of it, and probably not going to change anytime soon.
No,
I don't think that Amazon's going to be like, actually, I think we want to make less money from our sellers. I don't see that happening.
No, but economic inflation ebbs and flows on a national level. Amazon inflation always goes in one direction.
Right. It was funny, actually. I was talking to somebody recently who's dealing with the government of a country. And as they were describing what that they were dealing with, everything they were saying, I was like, oh my God, that sounds like Amazon.
Yeah. In terms of like government bureaucracy.
I needed to speak to somebody on a specific team, and they were like, somebody will call you at some point within the next 7 to 10 business days. And I was like, oh, I'm getting PTSD. But it's just funny because I was like, well, they are the size of a country. It does kind of make sense that they would be acting like dealing with a country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is our kind of our one post Prime Day podcast, because quite honestly, I didn't see much in the way of commentary after Prime Day.
No. I think it's just they're happening so often now.
Well, Friday was, there was basically a half day or maybe a day of some comments on it. And then some analysis on the data in terms of what type of spending. And then in the last couple of days, nothing. I mean, that alone, I think, tells you that people aren't shouting from the rooftops how wonderful it was.
I will say that on our side, I think that we saw possibly less sellers attacking each other than we have in previous years. Happened, but not on the mass scale that has happened in the past.
It happened more on the more lucrative ASINs. I think lesser ASINs that don't mean as much financially. There was less of the attacks just to see what happens. I mean, it seemed like it was more targeted. And I did do a couple of LinkedIn posts about what types of things we heard about and saw, which were what we expected. So at least we knew what was coming. But no, I mean, I really think people are scratching their heads and thinking about it, what just happened, but also thinking about maybe Q4 differently than they were. Because I think a lot of people didn't make as much as they needed to, not just wanted to, needed to for Prime Day. And they're going to really need to make up for it in Q4. And I don't even know if that's that controversial of a take.
No, it's been a weird year. We're not even.
That's your answer.
Are we halfway through? I guess we're halfway through.
Things are weird. Oh, we're halfway through. All right. We're halfway through. Yeah. And each year it seems there's less of a gap between, even though Prime Day was in June versus July. I mean, mid-July to Q4 is minimal, but I don't think there's that much more breathing room, even though Prime Day was in June, not July. I think it's already kind of Q4 go time.
We've talked about this before. There's this consolidation of the industry happening, which is interesting because it actually follows kind of what's happening in this country. But there's a
consolidation.
A consolidation and a widening. So there's a much smaller, but much bigger in terms of dollar amounts. So bigger in dollars amounts, but smaller in terms of number of people or numbers of businesses that are at the top. And then there's the middle is being eaten up. There's either sellers are getting out of it because they just can't compete anymore, or they're being consolidated into the bigger players. And so there is this change in the marketplace of now if you're a medium-sized business, you're not just competing against people your size, you're now competing against the billion-dollar companies that are taking over the space. And the question will be, is it going to be what it's been in the past, whereas because you're smaller and because you're more agile, that will ultimately end up being what will be successful for those smaller brands? Or are we just going to see a complete consolidation of the marketplace where it ends up just being maybe 100 big players that are controlling the entire marketplace? And we don't know yet, so we shall see.
Yeah. Well, I think...
But it's worth considering. If you are a smaller player, what do you have? What strengths do you have and what abilities do you have that some other of the bigger players don't have? And how can you deploy those now, even before it's dire? I think some brands are like, well, we're doing okay for now, so we don't really need to think about it. But I would be thinking about how are we going to continue to compete as the consolidation of the marketplace continues to play out. Personally, if I were you.
Well, they can't afford to not think ahead because...
it's very easy,
they have to think about
if you're a
selling.
medium-sized business, to just get stuck in the day-to-day of everything's fine now, so we're just going to keep doing this and we're just going to keep working on what's working right now, rather than thinking there are huge forces at play right now and we need to consider what will we be doing a year from now. And I think I've said this a number of times on this podcast, but realistically, most people listening to this aren't listening to all of the episodes. So one of my favorite games that I want to say Carlos Alvarez mentioned once, and that's where I got this from, and I think he took it from somebody else too, but business, that's what we do. Play the game with your team. What would put us out of business? And figure out what you can do to stop that from happening. If it were to come to fruition, what would you need to do to stop you going out of business? Because that's where you start to see those blind spots that isn't a problem now, but could be a problem in the near future. And how will you compete as these things change?
The initial wave is going to be operational costs. There's going to be people unfortunately losing jobs. Mm-hmm. And I think people are going to have to shed other types of overhead, like office space, go remote.
Yeah. And not to get like too Amazon about it, but once you identify what could put us out of business, a plan of action is actually a very good way of looking at that. Okay, what is the root cause of what could put us out of business? What can we do right now to fix this problem, or at least patch it? And then what can we implement to make sure this never happens? And again, not to get too Amazon on it, but to be fair, they did not make that format of a document. Right. But it is a useful thing to spend your time on. And I understand that we're all busy and usually juggling hundreds of things, but it's a lot easier to do that now when you're not in an emergency situation than it is later. Kind of like if your account gets suspended and you have no reserves to get help or to fund your no business income coming in time while your account is suspended, which is something we also talk to sellers a lot about.
And I'll be talking to sellers about that at the Growth Summit in New York very soon. So I'll be talking about that a bit more next week and some other videos I'm doing. By the way, I'm very impressed you did not break your stride while I dumped my drink on myself a minute ago. That was great that you didn't.
And I did. There was a moment of nearly laughing, but
if you kids aren't, if you're not watching at home, don't worry about it. But that was interesting.
I think I'm just used to you spilling things on yourself.
on my shirt. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't that exciting, but good note to end on. Good metaphor. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Leah, once again for your fabulous insights. We will not be talking about Prime Day after this.
Yay!
Because I've been talking about it all June.
Until the next one, which will be in 2 months.
June is over. So that's it, man. We'll be talking about the event in New York, which will be the first of its kind on the East Coast. And we'll be talking about many, many other wonderful, necessary things next week. Thanks for listening in. Watch me spill drinks on myself. We will catch you next time.